No, Taylor, definitely do not say that when we go live. Okay, we're live. Um, so we've got Taylor self-made programming, got Steve Fawcett, HWPO, and John Singleton of the program. There, none of you are fond of vowels except Taylor. Taylor's like, I will spell everything out.
Oh, yeah, we also kept one vowel in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, come on.
My acronym is not any vowels. SMTP.
yeah. Steve, yours. I said this to Fraser before, but HWPO is probably one of the worst acronyms because it actually takes longer to say than the full title. It's got more syllables than the full title.
Syllables, yeah. It's mad,
And he tried to convince me. He was like, no. He was like, HWPO, and I was like, no, but you can't change the speed at which you say. Like you're leaving out letters. He was like, no, it's definitely faster. I was like, man, it's not faster. Like it's just more syllables. Like it just doesn't
agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah, I was like, but you're Matt Fraser, so it's okay. So Taylor, self-made programming is in comparison to, I guess, Steve when it comes to like say JST and now HWPO and John with the program is like, the two of them have been around since like Greg was like, oh, I've got this idea. The two of them have been basically involved. You're kind of in your infancy when it comes to this like kind of hybrid approach to programming, I suppose. You coach in CrossFit Charlotte and then you have athletes that come there of varying abilities and like from your everyday to games aspirations, semis aspirations, and now you have self-made training program online through Fitr. I'm curious as to why now, like, was it your injury? Is that what promoted? Is that what gave you the kind of scope to think like, okay, now I actually have time and I like need to earn, so this is a good way to do both?
Yeah, 100%. I think right before semifinals last year, I tore my meniscus and I didn't have anything to do. And so I was like, fuck, I'm just going to coach more. And I was doing the scheduling at the gym. And then, I talked with Andy, who's the owner, my boss, like a dad to me. And he was like, yeah, pick up a couple more classes. And I overloaded myself. And we had this like heart-to-heart conversation. He's like, look, you can't steal everybody's classes. And you can't make a fucking living as a coach at a gym unless you own the gym. And today was a hard conversation because like I had nothing else on my mind other than competing. So like, I cried, he cried. It was like, you got to find another way to support yourself, make money. And, I had learned quite a bit from him, Jeff and Maggie Tinter, who are level 4s at the gym I moved from in Virginia. And then my coach, John, who's a level 4, and have loved programming and have worked with all of them quite a bit on it. And so I just kind of had the idea, and JR kind of helped push me in the right direction too. And just kind of started it on a whim on Instagram. Actually, it was an Instagram membership with people Venmo.
Yeah. I remember it's early days. Was there any surprises in doing it? Because I know there probably are people listening who see like a programming conversation happening and think, oh, that's something I'd like to do, or like, oh, I've always thought that could be a good thing to start doing. Has there been any surprises from say conception and then say moving it on to Fitr and kind of broadening your reach a bit? Has anything shocked you about it or taken you by surprise?
In terms of programming or running a business,
I guess both. I mean, I suppose we'll get into the weeds a bit about programming in a little bit, but I suppose just about like if I was someone who was intelligent enough to program for other people or even just like think up of a workout for myself once, then I might have the idea of like, oh, I reckon I could upscale that and I could like, deliver it to people and people might want that. And then I guess it's the same as I suppose people have that thing of like, I'd love to run a gym. I'd love to open a gym. And then you kind of say like, okay, well, you're going to have to do this and you're going to have to do this. And suddenly the list becomes so long that people go like, okay, fuck it. I just want to join a gym. I don't want to do any of that shit. Since you moved, like say from coaching the people in the affiliate to kind of this more hybrid approach of like, you've got people that you see every day and you've got people that you might never actually see their face. You just see names or whatever. Has any part of that surprised you of like, did it grow faster than you expected? Was it harder to get it off the ground than you expected? Or was it like, just kind of second nature, just kind of happened snowball?
I would say more than anything, it kind of happened to snowball. I mentioned I started on Instagram, and then like maybe a few months in, like they disabled my account because I was like commenting too much and like responding to people and like sending messages, and they're like, "You're a bot," and fucked me over. So I think you actually pushed me in the direction of Fitr, and then maybe Will Brandstetter as well. And that made everything just 1,000 times easier. But nothing really has been too crazy. I mean, I would say it snowballed really fast. For who I am, I don't, at the end of the day, what the fuck do I know? I'm not a 5-time games champion. I'm not Rich Froning. Like, I don't have this name to fall back on in terms of like, if I start a program, there's going to be 10,000 people that sign up right away. But I think Sevon's platform helped me a ton to start.
See, you've had kind of the opposite approach to that, I suppose, where especially in the last, like, say, a few months or 6-12 months, where you've had like a business that you've built and you like earned your chops and earned the respect of like your peers and athletes you're coaching and other coaches in the space and stuff, and then you like stepped away from that and stepped into a role in a business that basically, like Taylor is talking about there, where there is this name attached and there is this kind of like instant gravitas just because it's Matt Fraser's programming, and then you're becoming involved in that. The angst, I suppose, of stepping away from JST and into HWPO, then plus the pressure of like, okay, well, I mean, I better actually be good at this, like, because I've made a pretty big commitment. How have you found it since you've moved over? Has it been like what you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I think the thing that I enjoy the most is because obviously when I was running JST, you're doing everything else that comes along with it. You're not just writing programs and coaching athletes. You're trying to come up with marketing strategies. You're figuring out the finances, all the crap that comes alongside running the business that I actually don't have that much interest in doing. You end up that taking up potentially like 75% of my time. So then joining HWPO and specifically in the pro program, 90% of my time now comes down to writing programs, helping athletes, like doing actual online, like remote coaching, which is much more my kettle of fish. It's what I want to be involved in. It's what I enjoy about this job more so than the, figuring out what these algorithms now are on Instagram and trying to make sure that you're making enough noise but not too much, etc. So I think that's been the main thing since joining HWPO for me, is that I can actually, in the time that I've got to work now, I can do coaching and programming, which is what got me into the whole space in the first place.
John, so like I said, you were kind of standing behind Greg Glassman when he said, "Oh, we should start this thing that's like varied functional fitness." Not literally, but metaphorically. You've been around like since basically day dot, way back. The sport has changed an awful lot. The programmer, like the literal guy that does the programming, has literally changed to a different human. And with that, there's obviously been a lot of changes and stuff. When you're programming for the elite people, like say heading for semifinals, aiming for semifinals, aiming for the games and stuff, how much of what you do is like predicting? Because obviously you don't want to overshoot and be like, this is definitely going to happen, and then you're like, fuck, we neglected all this other stuff. Like, how much do you try and predict what's going to happen based off what you've seen in previous years or previous stages of the competition? And how much do you say like, well, it's still CrossFit, so it's still going to have this and this, even no matter what form it takes?
I felt like there was an awful lot in that one question. But yeah, so I first started CrossFit in 2007, early, something like that. And the competitions were literally held in car parks. It was a very different era to how it is now. And we kind of saw that boom going from, I think when Reebok stepped in, that was really when all of a sudden the regionals before was kind of in like in this parking lot basically, or school outside, and done all these places. Then Reebok took over, and all of a sudden we're like next to a football stadium. So it's a big change. But coming on to the specific question regarding, specific questions regarding how I program for athletes going to the games and how much we look at previous workouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to take all those things into account. Like, the games change each year, and I think there's a part of adapting to what has happened. Like this year we saw various movements come in with the crossover doubles or various different movements, skill movements on the hands. And so, most people have been practicing that because we know that skill is going to be integrated into the season. It's the same thing, they introduced a pegboard, and all of a sudden every gym's got a pegboard because that it's kind of a valid element in the CrossFit programming, and it may come up. So the previous years are important reference points as to what the athletes need to be doing.
So I actually sent, Taylor and JR do Shut Up and Scribble. Taylor literally just finished an episode like 5 minutes ago. But I actually sent John your last episode with JR and Will, where you're kind of going through like, well, what if he does this? And like that, and that's what got me thinking of like Steve is mentioning these different roles that a programmer has. Any programmer, I guess, who's running a business has all these different hats that they have to wear. But then you also have this kind of, you guys have this dual role of like, I suppose Steve might be more historically rather than just now, but you are programming for people, say like me, who are like, I've got an hour, like, or I've got 45 minutes, what will I squeeze in? And then you're also programming for people who are, okay, this is my year, and I'm going to make a big push here, and we need to kind of predict what's coming up. I need to be ready for all these kind of different tests. How do you balance, say, Taylor, you have your compete track and you have your 60 track. How do you balance, I guess, programming for these elite people who are heading for who are aiming for greatness or whatever, and then programming for people like me who are like, yeah, I'm not going to get Wednesdays done, but I'll do Thursdays or whatever, and not overwhelm the second group, like not make it so complicated or so, because if it's your style as well, because you are an athlete who is aiming for that yourself, so that's what you're used to and what you're surrounded to. Do you ever find it difficult to program for someone like me or someone who's like, oh, I'll do 4 days a week maybe?
I don't think it's difficult, just because I also spend, 8 hours a day in an affiliate, and that's the 95% of the population in that gym is people like you and who are just in it to get fitter and live a better life. I think for like games athlete Michelle and semifinals athletes that I have, I program for them individually. So it's quite different. Well, it's different to a degree from compete in the sense that it's tailored just to them, and it's not a general program out there for every competitor. And then, so I don't really want to include their programming in the sense of like my 2 general tracks, but the 2 general tracks that I have, I think I've found it easiest and pretty effective to start with the compete program, which is, based off the CrossFit competitive season. And then in terms of the 60-minute or every day, I still try to stay pretty true to CrossFit, and I use the open as a benchmark. And so I take elements of compete, and I'm, if they have a couple of these 3 movements at a higher skill, I still like to use workouts that have a similar stimulus for 60, but just more accessible and more of a class format, rather than, okay, this is 1 piece out of a 6 or 5 piece training day for compete.
And Steve, then, so you have the pro track, and is your programming based off you join on day 1, or is it based off people can join in whenever they want?
Yeah, so on the pro track, it's calendar based. So group rolling calendar, as they are in Fitr, where if you join, well, last week was the sign up window. We open and close the sign up window, so you can only start at the beginning of a phase, but everyone is on, who's following it today is on today's date. So everyone follows it to the calendar, rather than like someone being on day 1, someone being on day 27, which is what flagship is, for example.
Yeah. So
flagship, you follow the progression in the order it's written, but on pro, it's a group rolling calendar program where you're on the day.
And does that is that purely for your like coaching ease, or is there also a bit of FOMO where it's like, oh shit, if I don't sign up today, I won't get to sign up. Like I'll miss my window.
Mainly because obviously the pro follows the CrossFit season. So when it's the open for everyone. So we need to make sure that everyone's doing the same training, the week before, and you can control like the volume and intensities coming into a competition a lot better. It also helps because we're all trying to grow an online community, and if everyone's going through the same workouts at the same time, like in the same week, there's a little bit more back and forth there between the members, between themselves, and from the coach to the member. You can just have a bit more relevant information content going out to them. You can communicate little focus points for this week that everyone's going to do, rather than a random week that someone might be doing in 4 weeks' time. So it just, in my eyes, it makes it a lot easier when you're doing a group rolling calendar type program to create like a bit of an online community, because everyone's just like they are when they go to the affiliate. Everyone's going in and they're doing the workout of the day. They're doing the same workouts during the week. And it's as close to that as you can without being in person.
John, did I see the program brought out a High Rocks program recently?
We have something called courses. So these are like set standalone pieces lasting between like 4 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And so it's not like our typical programming, but it's something that people can follow who want to do High Rocks. It's like a 6-week program they can follow leading up to a race.
And with that kind of stuff, so something that you said, I actually can't remember when you said it to me, but you said to me at one point that it's difficult as a coach or as someone who owns a programming company or as a programming company to be heard among like all the noise, because there's so much noise. It's difficult to be heard among all the noise without just adding to the noise and without just like standing in a room where everybody's shouting and just shouting. As a, like a founder of a program and someone who coaches and programs and works with a team of coaches, like what are the strategies that you guys use to separate yourselves? Like, is it that kind of stuff? Is it different offerings and trying to have like a varied approach? Is that part of it, or is there like a lot of strings to the bow maybe?
I think fundamentally we just tried to do a good job. You're right, there's lots of programming around. I mean, there's hundreds of choices, but we're just really focused on what we can do well. We focus on trying to have good coaches on board, trying to support our athletes. And then we kind of hope that by doing a good job there, the rest follows. As Steve alluded to, there is a lot of extra stuff that you have to do, and so I can definitely relate to the joy of freeing off some of that extra stuff. But ultimately, that's where our focus lies. Is we have our athletes on board. How can we do a great job for them? And then we just kind of hope that the rest follows along.
Has that always been the approach, or have you had those kind of moments where maybe upon reflection you were like chasing new customers, or you were like your focus was in the wrong place in hindsight?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different stories, but ultimately you kind of have to have some financial income, and that was probably one of the biggest parts that we were lacking at the start. I was just so passionate about what I did, just work with athletes. I loved working with athletes, and at some points, you'd find yourself, I was in Mallorca at this point, you couldn't pay rent or didn't have any money to do anything, so you're like, okay, so we've got to fill those basic needs of like rent and eating before we can go through. So and that's pretty much where the program evolved from. Was people were interested in what we were doing, and so like, okay, let's formalize something a bit more structured, and that's kind of how it's evolved. But ultimately, it's still very passion driven, which is like a bit of a blessing and a curse in some ways, because we really just get excited about seeing the athletes do the best they can, seeing them grow, develop, but you do have to put a financial model around that if you want to get good coaches on board and if you want to survive. And back when we started and back when Steve had JST, like there weren't the likes of Mayhem, Hard Work Pays Off, Proven, and arguably that's made us up our game in that sense. We are aware that we do try and do a good job, but the job that we have to do now has to be so excellent because you have these people who are doing great things as well. And I think in general, the competition's been good for the sport. The programming competition has made everyone up their game. Everyone kind of up their media. And I think in general, it's been good for the sport having so much competition.
Yeah. Taylor, like, okay, I don't want this to sound like I want you to change it, because
Just
like
go.
I follow Self-Made, and like I pay for it, and I don't want that. I don't want what I'm paying to change. But how do you land on your price? Because like it's like $20 for everything. So I can do Compete. I mean, I can't do Compete, but if I could do Compete, I can do Compete. Or the 60. And then like I'll just show now I have access to like Taylor's, obviously. I don't have access. I'm assuming that the programs is equally as detailed, and so is, I have no doubt, the Steve is as well. But like the detail of like, this is every day there's this level of like typage. That's just to Compete. Then you've got the, like my one, the 60, which I don't know if I've ever read in full.
Fuck you, dude.
the same on the conditioning days. The conditioning days are shared, like, so that's, he's lessened his work on those days. But again, like full warm up, full lifting, then you go back out and you go down into the notes, and you've got full stimulus, full swap out, like why we're doing it, what the purpose is. Like, in hindsight, do you think that you've underpriced yourself a bit?
I started at $9. So I mean, at the end of the day, I think going back to what John said, one, I'm just super passionate about it, and I try to focus more than anything on just doing the absolute best that I can and what I know to do. I also try to learn as much as I can from people who are established in the space and that clearly are successful. And I don't. I think the price more than anything stems from me knowing what it's like as an athlete to pay $160 or $180 membership at a gym, and then pay an individual coach $150 to, some programs are charging $400, whatever, or paying for an $80 program. And like, I'm not very far away from that point in my life where I am just worried about paying rent and like shopping at Lidl because I can't afford Harris Teeter or other stuff like that. So I think that comes into account. And then is
it hard? Like, is it hard? And like anyone can chime in on this, but is it hard to put a value on, like a monetary value on what you're offering? Because there is that thing of like, well, I don't want to just charge like a pittance and then in like 3 or 4 months be like, shit, I way undershot there, I need to raise it up, and then piss people off that way. I also don't want to overcharge everyone and then have like people be put off, be like, well, fuck that, I don't know, who does he think he is charging that much? I'm not paying that. Like, is it difficult to land on like a safe middle ground that it does allow you to shop in a better shop than Lidl? There's nothing wrong with Lidl. Like, I shop there regularly, but I'm only a teacher and I have 2 kids. But that does allow you to have a certain quality of life that, like, obviously you're passionate about it and that's great and whatever, but you also need a fucking roof over your head. So like, to not undersell yourself so much that you're putting a barrier on how your quality of life or whatever, but also not overcharging so much that you're like, this is great, if I get this many like clients, I'll have this much money, and then it's like you end up with none because you overcharged. Like, when you first settle on a price, is there a lot of back and forth? Like, Taylor, you probably did it most recently, so is there a lot of back and forth there where you're like, oh, that's too much, and is that too much, or is that too little? Is it like, will people pay this?
I definitely looked at what other programs were charging, with the full understanding that most people don't know who I am, and I kind of have to dangle a bit of a carrot to get them to try. And also knowing, hey, I need to charge less than a lot of these other established programs because I'm just not established. And I think with the idea, and I've done this for just a total of 1 year. Like I started it a year ago with the idea that over time, building a volume of membership base will take care of itself. Where that helps more than anything is the volume of membership in an online program is what you're going to make money with, not necessarily the price per membership as you would as like an individual coach. Um, I don't know if I'm charging too little. I know I'm not charging too much, but I don't really care to make a price increase anytime soon. Just because, again, I'm small and I want people to get a lot for what they pay for. I care about that. That's a value that I care about. Is I want people to feel like, holy shit, I get so much for what I pay for. And it's not just this conglomeration of like, words. It's like, there's just 2 programs, but there's a lot of detail. I think that's what I care about.
Yeah. I think if you do raise your prices, there's probably some people's price that you could leave the same, and then like,
well, I
like
did
maybe geographically based. If you've got like customers, I'll just like in Ireland, say you could just leave theirs where it is, like a grandfather clause that they just stay where they are, and then everyone else like.
I did start it with that. So I think the people who started the first month, I told them I'd keep their price the same for the life of the membership. So
that's cool. Steve, you obviously had the same, like I think Elisa mentions here in the comments, it's the same for any small business. And it is like, even sometimes I'd have like a brand or whatever approach the show and you're like, well, what number do I say? Because like if I say too much, they'll tell me to fuck off. If I say too little, I'll regret that I didn't say more. So it's like putting a value on your expertise. And there is that thing of, you go to a really good coffee shop and you ask for a coffee and they say like, oh, that's £5, whatever. And you're like, fuck. And it's like, well, you're not paying for the £5. The £5 isn't for the 30 seconds it takes them to make it in the water. It's for the 10 years that they've been a barista, and it's for the, how easy or difficult or arduous was it for you when you started off landing on, maybe I should charge this, or is that too much? Is that too little? And then as JST grew, was it difficult not to, like make hay and be like, fuck it, like we've got a good reputation here, let's charge, X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, I think we started in 2013, and the very first price we were at £30 a month, and within a month, I think it was within a very short time, I upped it to 40. I think we was getting quite a bit of interest. Realized that this was something that was, getting quite a lot of people on board, like early doors. So we bumped it up to 40, and then we stayed at that for about 8 years at 40, and then only had to up it then because of your usual tax, government issues, VAT. So we had to bump it up then to 48. And it was at that point there where membership started like stalling. And I'm not saying it was because of that 8 point. I think there's a lot of other factors within the industry. COVID, the fact that when COVID hit, every man and his dog started an online program. All thanks to Fitr. All thanks to this website helped develop. I think there became loads of other factors. But we came down to the point where when we're at £40, we'd realised what we had added in value since when we started in 2013. So when we first moved to £40, and then 7 years later, all the extra stuff that you could get, and it was still out at the same price. And I spoke to a few kind of like, I had a couple of, it's Darrow Boyle, actually, Irish fellow who's like my business mentor through the years. And he was just like, you'd be daft to not put the price up, and simply because of the extra value that, not just the extra value, but the education, the experience and knowledge and, qualifications that you've done over those years, like it's worth more on the customer end. But then obviously you've got to try and weigh up. It's not just like Taylor said there, it's not just the price per that one customer, it's the overall income that's coming in, the type of program that you can do the same amount of workload and have 200 people on, you can do the same amount of workload and have 10 people on. So there is quite a lot of factors that come into it. I think a big part of it, and I guess this is just like the PT industry, the personal training industry, is if someone's charging £80 per hour for a session and someone charges £30 per hour, straight away without even talking to these people, without even trying to understand the background, the qualifications, their experience, the £8 per hour PT is better. That's what everyone thinks straight away. The more expensive, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to get better results if I go to them. So there's an element of that, and then also, and it shouldn't be this way, an element. Well, if I'm paying more for it, then I should probably like pay more attention to all of these notes that like Taylor's program there. If I'm paying more, I should probably read all these notes that I'm paying for, rather than if I'm just paying this much, I don't mind that amount coming out of my bank, so I'm not probably like you just said then, Pete. You didn't even read the notes and you're paying for it.
I do read the notes.
It's an element of that as well, I guess. Can you sometimes undershoot yourself in price and then also undershoot yourself in the commitment, for that matter, that your members, your subscription base, the kind of values you at.
Isn't it like that? Isn't that a strategy in like shops or stores? Sorry, Taylor. Stores where they there's 3 basically identical objects, but they price them. So there's one like stupidly expensive, one stupidly cheap, and then the one they want you to buy is the one that's just underneath the stupidly expensive one, where you're like, oh, that's a bargain. I'll buy that. That one's too cheap. It's obviously shit. That one's too expensive. Look at this deal I found, and it's like £10 cheaper or whatever, but you go for it. Yeah, it is tricky. Like, and it's, I think the 2 things that would be most difficult to someone who's starting doing this is putting a price on what they do and then finding a way to scale it out to where they want it to be. Like if you've got a 5-year plan, scaling it out to like, okay, I've got my 5 mates that follow my programming, or I've got the athletes that I see every day or whatever, like Taylor had. And then how do I reach, without getting banned from Instagram for like commenting too much, how do I reach more people or enough people that it actually is a viable source of income? Which obviously Fitr is great at answering. John, with yours then, the kind of everyday athlete or the everyday track, we'll say, do you look at, say, like what you're doing with the elite athletes and what you're doing with your camps, and like when you have those kind of gatherings and stuff, do you look at the programming that they're doing and scale it down accordingly for Gen Pop, or is it more like, say, your classic CrossFit, like where it's like, right, we're going to lift heavy, we're going to run fast, we're going to high intensity? Like how do you approach the 2 different types of programming there?
So I think at a certain point, like the elite program is scalable down. So for example, if you've got someone who's still competitive, there might be a difference between 2 sessions a day and 1 session a day. And arguably that 2 sessions can kind of be modified down to 1 session. Then at a certain point, you can't keep scaling down. So like, you can't just take your elite program and put it into an affiliate programming, because there's just so much variance going from someone who's training 3 to 4 hours a day to someone who needs to do like 60 minutes warm up to out the door, basically. So there's kind of a crossover point where from the elites down, at a certain point, it will just have to transfer into a new type of programming.
Sorry, I was reading a comment there where Stephen Flores was saying that SMTP stands for
suck my tiny penis.
Well, he said self-made tiny penis, but yeah, sorry, I got distracted, John. Just as you were finishing up, I was like, does that say penis? Because my screen is really far away from where I'm sitting. With the program then, so do you offer affiliate programming as well, John?
Yeah, we have affiliate programming. So we have what we call the box program, where we offer out to gyms. It's like a sensible offering.
Is that intensive? Is that like labor intensive compared to, say, is it the same level of work and just someone else is doing it, or is it more labor intensive than like the 60-minute version for your individual athletes?
Yeah, it's relatively labor intensive because of the notes that we add into that. So we have coaches' notes and various other things that kind of add value to the product. So from that side of things, because it's not one of the programs we can just kind of you can't create the leap, then create the box program. Off that, you kind of create a new product for the box programming. So from that sense, it is more labor intensive. Yeah.
Do you still do affiliate, Taylor?
No, I stopped when Cap included their program in the affiliate fee. And my boss is Spencer's dad. So like I've been around Spencer and him quite a bit, and that kind of started it with that idea of how Handplan panned out and just what I can do as one person versus what Cap offers now in the affiliate fee. To me, just not worth the time and effort. And I also like me and Andy program for our gym. And it's really cool that we can use like our 10 prowlers and the hill we have out back and the 10 GHDs. And then when I was trying to program for, the other affiliates that I had when I had it, it's just too much for just one person.
See,
I've got not to kind of hijack your podcast here, Peter, but I've got a question for John and for you, Taylor, for that matter, I guess. If let's say both your programming companies just went bust tomorrow, I hope they don't. But
he fucking hopes they do. He's a rival.
Am I applying for a job at Hard Work Pays Off?
and you only had to restart, and you were only allowed to do one program that you're currently offering. What would it be, and why? John,
Taylor, you go first, Taylor.
Well, yeah, Taylor.
Taylor looked like he had an answer. He pointed
I pointed it. No, I pointed it.
John. Like Steve. I quite like Steve being in charge of the podcast.
Yeah, should we fuck Pete off?
John, you go first.
She's gone. Honestly, it would probably be, working with small group individual, just because I do love the competitive side. I love everything about that. So it would probably be something to do with kind of like small group competitive athletes would be. So probably, if we're kind of categorize, it would be like individualized small group coaching, basically.
I would probably do what I did to start. And when I first started, it was basically just SMTP 60 or the 60-minute track or the one workout a day track, where it's essentially .com. Not in exactly what's programmed, obviously, in my own flavor, but that framework of program with all the notes and coaching that goes with it, and a general group rolling calendar program. I think.
Steve, would you revert back? So you have all your the different tracks that you've ever worked in. Is you can answer any of those?
Yeah, I think I would stick to. It's kind of a middle ground between both what John and Taylor said there. I would just have a competitors track and just have that as like the bones, and maybe even make it exclusive in terms of like there's a maximum of 50 people. If this is just, if for argument's sake, it's me on my own, I'm doing all the program writing, I'm answering all the questions, social media, then that would just make it like maybe 50 people max exclusive program. The program is the same one program for everyone, but in terms of how you write it and the information and education that you give out helps people kind of put their own twist on it. I think I would be kind of in between the two there, where it's has in it a relative individual touch, but doesn't quite. You can have more than an individual. To be an individual coach, you can maybe have maximum 10 athletes without being completely driven around the bend. So it kind of is like I would kind of go for that as like an in between.
Yeah. That's nice. I was actually worried that this chat would turn into a pissing contest, but you've actually all found your own corner of the market to corner there, where none of you are impeding on each other's ability to earn when, as Steve says, all your businesses go bankrupt and you have to restart with only one. None of you are actually touching each other. So that's great. It's so kind and gracious of you all to totally avoid each other. What about then so you've kind of all got this kind of hybrid approach where, see, you obviously work with athletes in person, and you know, you have eyes on, hands on, whatever, and like in person sessions. John, you have your athletes that are in based in Mallorca. Then you have the athletes like Moritz, who kind of visits regularly and comes and trains there with you. Taylor, you have Michelle in person, and then Emily wasn't in person. Is that right?
She's remote. She's in Idaho.
She's
which
remote.
is yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got, you know, like your superstars like me and stuff that are obviously not in person. But you also, John, you have the kind of remote clients. Steve, I'm presuming like 99.99% of the HWPO people that you deal with are remote. Like Jake isn't going to do a little drop in from Australia or whatever.
No.
The challenges of balancing those two then, and like trying to make that kind of hybrid approach work. Steve, do you want to start us off on that? Or like, is it easier than maybe people think it is to make it work, like to have this kind of in-person, you know, that you're able to get hands-on people, but then also maintaining this online community and keeping them feeling like they're involved and feeling like they're kind of part, because like that's the CrossFit thing, isn't it? Like that's the thing, it's the community, and it's the, like Taylor mentioned at the offset about these affiliates and that feeling of going into an affiliate. And you know, like is it hard or is it easier than you thought it would be to kind of keep that momentum going online?
I'm not sure if this answers your question exactly, but I guess it kind of does. I think everyone at some point or in the last few years, any programming house has had the idea and this fancy of, we'll have a gym where all athletes will come together and they'll be around each other training every day, and it'll be like to be able to have eyes on them coaching every day, be able to have really, you know, specific individual cues, and you know, no stone left unturned in terms of athletes there. And then I've tried it. I tried it with JST. Obviously, HWPO now have their own HQ. And for me, what I've realized probably a year into trying it with JST was that I don't feel like it's the best way to go about business in terms of the athlete's development, because there's so many other factors that come into play for the athlete and for their development. And within our sport, like the athletes need to be very responsible themselves. Like they can't just have the hands held every session, every day, telling them when to drink, telling them when to eat, telling them coaching cues for every single exercise. There needs to be an element of, you need to figure this out yourself, given the information that, you know, you're being relayed, whether it's from when you come over and saw us for a week or two, or you maybe had a bit of an extended stay where it was a little bit more intense for that period, but then they need to go away and figure things out themselves and be responsible for themselves day to day. So I feel like what we've both on JST and HWPO have had a bit more success is just having shorter trips. Like athletes come over, they have shorter trips where it's a bit more intense. They get the coaching, they get the information, but majority of the year around, they're going off their own backs and, you know, using the information or the cues and implementing it day to day with their own responsibility, rather than just relying on someone to hold the hand. Because as we all know, on a competition floor, or as soon as an athlete leaves the corrals, you can't do it. You have no impact, and you can't just hope that they're going to make the right decisions themselves if you've made all the decisions for the last year leading up. So they need to. It's a balance of that I found, and I definitely think not having the all day, every day in person commitment to the athlete is the way to go. John, it'd be interesting to hear your take on that, because I know you had kind of at the same time as I had like an in-house group going. How did you find it?
Fucking hell, Steve, will you let me ask one thing? Like,
I'm just conversationing, you know.
No, but I think it is very true, and I think the thing is our sport is still quite new, and we've been through lots of different strategies. And there was this one moment where everyone was like, okay, all the athletes need to live together full time. Like CompTrain was starting an academy. They were going to bring everyone in to live together, and Mayhem had all these people.
That worked out really well, the CompTrain one. That's thriving now, the academy.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to Steve's point, I wouldn't necessarily say it's even about the athletes being independent on the competition floor. I just think it's really hard to hold a group of competitive athletes in one place. So, I've thought about this a lot. Like, just how can we build this athlete center that works well? And we've looked through Mayhem. Obviously, Steve just said like hard work pays off, have their new gym. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that model plays out. You kind of got like training think tank model where they have lots of individual coaches on site and lots of different athletes. But I would say, we've probably tried and failed at that model in terms of having a group of high-level athletes in one place for prolonged periods of time. I think it works if you've got like one athlete, but as soon as you start adding more and more to that, the dynamic starts getting very tricky to manage.
Do you mean like drama, like that kind of thing, like competitive, like try to like put a lid on stuff?
Yeah, people are just competitive. And also one thing that you've really got to take into account is the purpose. So, Steve said he had his place in Wigan, we have our place in Mallorca. And I think one of the big things is when the athletes move there, they move there just for training and for nothing else. So, for example, if we were in London, let's say, and you just so happen to have competitive individuals who were also there for work or also there for uni or a relationship, they have another purpose in their life. But like in Mallorca, okay, 3 weeks fine, 6 weeks fine. But when you start going into the months, it's like they don't have their friends, they don't have their family. It's only competition and only the gym. It eventually just starts getting too much. It's just too intense. And so exactly as Steve and the other training programs have identified now, long periods of time is really hard to maintain a competitive group of athletes together.
Yeah, it's funny that I feel like I probably last longer in Mallorca than Wigan. I just never been to Wigan, but I just feel like I probably could last 6 months in Mallorca, maybe 6 days in Wigan.
Given the climate in Mallorca and your skin complexion, I feel like you'd last longer in Wigan.
I've actually I've gotten darker. I was on Savannah's show a couple of weeks ago and I was like, we got off live and I was like, I am fucking see-through and everyone else is like tanned. Like they look like they're covered in varnish. I've actually gotten better. The key is if it's dark outside here, I'm grand. Taylor, the online and hybrid approach, I guess for you specifically, what I'm thinking of is obviously because this is my experience of your programming is the chat, like community chat in your app is, I feel, incredibly active. Like there's a consistent flow of messages, whether that's like a question of someone saying like, oh, what, like my absolute favorite, I will never forget this question is Taylor programmed burpee broad jumps in a workout. And it was 7 feet of burpee broad jumps, and someone asked, is it 7 foot or 7 inches? And I just could not stop laughing at the idea of someone doing it. I was like, no, dude, that's a narrow jump. I was like, that's different. But like whether it's a question like that or like a question about one of the workouts, or you guys mentioned, you've all alluded to it, that feeling of walking in the gym and the other class is leaving when you're coming in and they're like, fucking hell, it's rough today. And that happens in the app as well, where it's like people are saying like, man, did anyone do those fucking back squats? Did anyone do that? Whatever. Oh, geez, my legs after yesterday, whatever. So you do have that, that because I don't train at an affiliate. So now I have that through the app or through Taylor's, community chat and stuff, where I do have those moments of like, oh shit, I'm dreading tomorrow. Great. Thanks, guys. But Taylor, like how important is that to you as a coach to have that? I guess you've attracted like people who are similar to you or have similar, style of expression and viewpoints and stuff, just through your appearances and your prolonged interviews and stuff that you've done. But now you also have these people who, like, they're kind of doing some of the legwork for you. Like the fun and the community that Glassman talked about years ago or whatever is there because they're just kind of taking that lead, I guess.
I feel like a pretty good reflection of my chat is looking at Sevon's comment section on his live shows. I mean, I go back to, you know, that's kind of where I established what, you know, whatever name that I have for myself, that at this point, I think a lot of my reach was through that platform, and that community is super active. And I also try to have as much of a personal approach as possible. Like when people jump on a trial, like I reach out like once a week. I go through that, and it takes, you know, sometimes it doesn't take very long, and sometimes it takes a long time. And yeah, the fun is in the community. I think it's so evident. And I have just been super fortunate that people use that a lot on SMTP and on the Fitr chat. They blow it up sometimes, which is awesome, and I love it. And I think also knowing that like I'll respond and talk to them too, like, helps. So I just try to be active in there. Sometimes I am, and other times I'm like on vacation or just super busy and I'm not as active, and people pick up the slack. So I think it's super important. I'm just lucky and grateful that it's as good as it is right now, and hopefully continues to stay that way and gets better.
Because even like I do dad hours as well for days that I'm like, I've got literally 10 minutes, like, or I'm getting up early in the morning. I just want to do some stupid cardio session that just requires no brain capacity at all, like, to do it. And like that uses Wodify. I'm like, Wodify is so shit. And I'm not just saying that, like, it is so shit. But like, there's no, it's literally just like the program or whatever. And like, to Brandon's credit, he's tried, like, he has a Facebook group and stuff, but like, I'm not going on Facebook to write to people and say, like, I don't have the app on my phone, so I'd have to log in on a laptop and be like, hey guys, what, like, reply to like 40 messages or whatever they're on it. So I just don't use it. But like, and I think that's something that, without being intrusive, when I open the programming, I can see, oh, there's messages here. I'll check that just to make sure there wasn't some confusing thing that nobody understood that I need to read or whatever. But then also, it, like I say, it's that thing, that affiliate feeling of like, oh, hey guys, we're all in it, this kind of shared suffering or whatever together. So I do think that's it's a real positive from the app. What about reaching new people then? Taylor, obviously, like, I guess, okay, are we all in agreement that the main aim is to maintain your client base first, keep the people that are with you happy and keep them coming back? Is that job one? Is that like the priority? Nobody disagrees with that, no?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. And then reaching new people is like job two. So it's like, you want the word to get out. So you're relying on word of mouth. You're relying on the stuff that Steve was talking about at the start with the Instagram and algorithms and all that shit, marketing and everything. You're trying to, push stuff, and, like, the crown that the program ran, like, that's obviously going to get your name out there. And there's all these different like avenues that people can explore to try and reach new people and stuff. Is FOMO a big part of it? Like, is that something that you want to cultivate? Is it like you want to cultivate a reputation? You want to cultivate like, oh, this is a really good program and you should follow it, and that kind of word of mouth thing. But you also want to cultivate that FOMO thing of like, shit, am I lacking, or am I missing out on something by not signing up for this? Like, is that one of your strongest weapons? John, what do you think?
I think honestly, you just have to do your thing. Like, probably the most successful programming out there is street parking. And like, they're just doing their thing. They're super successful. I mean, it's kind of obvious that Mayhem was going to be successful because you got Froning. It's obvious Hard Work Pays Off is going to be successful because you got Fraser. But street parking, sorry, Steve. But honestly, I think you're like the second wave. This is where the next boom's coming. But with the street parking, they just went out, did their thing, and it's immense. And so I think if you kind of passionate about something, you kind of want to add your own style. There's been lots of different successful programs in CrossFit with different styles, like Outlaw Wave, for example. When that came in back in the day, it was like everyone was doing Outlaw. It kind of drifted away. Invictus was big, seemed to drift away. CompTrain was big. So I think there's different trends and different waves. And honestly, just trying to predict what's going to happen, trying to like, these guys are doing this, these guys are doing this. I think you just have to stick with what you enjoy, with what you're good at, and then in some sense you have to hope that the rest follows.
Did you use other platforms before Fitr, I assume?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like we had like sent out an email and then had to correlate that with people's payments. I mean, it was a freaking nightmare. And then we built our own website. We built like a PDF. I mean, this is back before there were these program platforms available, and obviously now it's no brainer. As Steve said, you know, back when we started the programs, these platforms weren't available. Whereas now it's like the easiest thing in the world to start your own programming. Like anyone can do it, you know. Fitr's just created this platform where you literally just sign up and you have everything you need. And before that, or pre-COVID, whenever you want to call it, it was definitely not that simple to deliver a good product online.
Steve, you've obviously been quite integral to the growth of Fitr in that you kind of came on early days and helped and gave feedback and this isn't working, that isn't working with Leon. From where it started, I remember hearing, you know, Emma McQuaid talking about using it. She was one of the kind of guinea pigs at the start and getting the kinks out of the system and stuff. And then from where you see it now, where you have the program, Invictus, HWPO, like Self-Made, you know, just a shit ton of, like, it's actually quicker to name the ones that aren't on it than the ones that are on it at this stage. When you see where it's grown to, like, is it just that kind of perfect storm of there was that gap in the market that John was talking about, and you had been around long enough, and Leon had the kind of, you know, knowledge of the other side of things to take what you were saying and say, yeah, we can do that, or no, that's not possible. And was it just kind of a perfect storm of all those things coming together at once that made Fitr like basically start Taylor's career after his Instagram got turned down?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is there's certainly a gap in the market in terms of the tech space of something that is available out there where you could take away as much of the admin problems that are connected. Like John said there, I had a similar setup before joining Fitr where you'd have all these payments on separate merchants, whether it was like PayPal or Go Cardless or whatever, and it was a manual job to link and check someone's payment with their active account on the website. It was a manual job to link those together. So when someone signed up, you had to then manually make sure they got the link and connect the email. Sometimes they'd use different email addresses for different sites. You just have to kind of use a little bit of common sense. So there's a lot of human error. And we, before joining Fitr, we had I had a guy working full time that was what he did. It was on there day to day to make sure when cancellations were off, it would be linking to the both websites, etc. So there was definitely a factor of it being a large hole in the market, and I still don't think, I'm not just saying this, there is any other apps, websites, platforms that can do it to the level where Fitr are, where you can literally just you launch a program, you just have a link that's maybe available there via Instagram or whatever, and overnight people can just join and sign up. No buttons need to be pressed. You can wake up, and we all dream of the 500 clients that have done that one program. They can all view the training straight away. There's no extra. They can get sent all the documents like as soon as they've signed up. They don't have to wait for anyone on the other side of the world to wake up and, you know, make people active or anything like that. So I think that was a huge thing that was missing in the industry. And I think when it became available, it became a no-brainer for these big brands that have joined Fitr to do it, because like I said, it lost one. It saved me one full-time wage. So I hate to think the amount of people that knocked out of a job around the world.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it's great. It's like that guy that used to do that full-time job was like, that fucking asshole. He's like, I hate Fitr. He's like burning Fitr flags every day. Taylor, you obviously had, so you had the idea, you spoke to, you know, your coach or mentor or whatever about doing it, and this is what you came up with. And then when you started doing it, you had your kind of hiccup of like, oh shit, Instagram thinks I'm a robot. I think you were on my show and I talked to you after we finished and said like, oh, you should actually probably should look at Fitr, like, you know, I'm not just saying it or whatever. When you started off, and like Steve's mentioning there that you literally just launch your program and then kind of sit back and see what happens, were you surprised at how easy it was to just get it off the ground and not have to kind of put in all these foundations and, you know, build everything from the ground up?
Well, I didn't use any other platforms prior to that. Like, I knew how hard it was to have a private Instagram account and accept people who only Venmoed me as followers, and post the workouts there. And then when I was like, oh, you know, Fitr was, I think, cheaper than Sugar Watt or whatever else I was looking at the time, for the membership that I wanted, which I think was the unlimited membership. That's the one that's $70, $69 or something like that. So that's what I bought. I was like, you know, I would really, at the time I was going like, man, can I afford $70 a month for this? And then it's insanely easy. And I feel like it's only it's a blessing. And the only curse is that that's my expectation now, is that if there were ever to be another app that I would consider, would have to be that easy. And there isn't one that's that easy. And there isn't one that has everything in one place. Like you mentioned, the training, the notes, tracking, benchmarks, and a chat, with not just the community, but individual people. And that makes the payment processing pretty seamless. And I'd use Stripe with, an event that we run out of the gym. And so I knew how easy Stripe was. I was like, oh, that's great. And then White Label came out, and I wasn't any longer in a place where I had to consider if I could afford $70. Now I could consider if I could afford $1,100. But it's that for sure worth it as well. I think just for people to see the name of the program and the logo on the app when they pull it up, just credibility, more professional.
It is actually really cool. And it is something that, like, I remember I talked to Steve originally where Leon put it up, and Steve shared it in a story and was like, this is groundbreaking. And I was like, okay, cool. Will you just please explain to me what this means? Because I don't understand what White Label. I thought it was something to do with the Beatles first, like the White Label. I don't know what I thought it was. And he explained, like, basically you can put your own artwork or your own colors on the app. And I was like, oh yeah, that actually does sound cool. And it wasn't until I actually joined Self-Made, and the option comes up straight away, like, would you like to change? And it was like the Fitr. There's nothing wrong with the Fitr logo, but it was like the Fitr app. And then when I changed it, I was like, I belong to something. Like, immediately I had that feeling of like, shit, this is really cool. And it was, I think it's something that you need to see. You physically need to see the app change on your phone to be like, shit, that's really cool. Like, all the colors change when you go into the app, and then the logo changes. So like when you unlock your phone, you have, like, you probably won't be able to see it, but I have like the Wodify logo there for dad hours. And then I have the SMTP is like beside it. And like, I'll always check that one first. I'll be like, is there anything there that I can squeeze in? And then if there's not, I'll be like, no, I'll go back out. I'm going to fucking Wodify and wait for it to load. And like, wait for it to tell me that it's updated to the latest version that I don't need to fucking know when I open the app. But yeah, no, it is. The White Label is like, honestly, it is next level. It's really cool.
And unlimited coaches, I was going to say, is the other huge perk of that, is having, not that I have any other coaches, but when I can afford it and when I need it.
Well, Brian Friend was on yesterday, and he seems to think he has a job because he's moving to
he does. So. He does. I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'll have to ask him about Fitr then, when he gets involved. Look, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer because I feel John's eyes burning a hole in my forehead the longer this goes on. I really do appreciate you coming on. It's been great. Like, you know, it is. There are times where if I do a show that's like, you know, specifically sponsored by something that I feel like, you know, oh, is it a bit like crass, or will people think like, oh, he's only saying like because he's paid to whatever? But like, I think it comes across how valuable the three of you. Obviously, Steve, you find it valuable because, you know, your mattress is made of money or whatever. But like, in general, for your businesses, I feel like the three of you, I feel like it's come across how valuable it has been. Especially, I think, for Taylor, as someone who a year ago was in the shoes of a lot of people who might be watching this thinking, I wonder if. and he's done it, and he's done it through Fitr, and it's made life easier. And then the other two guys who've been around like donkey's years and who have tried everything else and realized that this is the way to go. But I think the reason I work with Fitr is because I admire so much of what they've done and how easy they've made it for people like Taylor to be like, hey, I can actually make a career out of being an athlete and helping athletes, rather than, oh, I need to sell my soul to Noble or whatever to thank fuck I didn't say one of the brands that are associated with the show when I gave that example. But you know what I mean? I think they've made life easy for so many people. Like all the big programs that are mentioned, but like you could have 2 clients and start this and make it work and then grow it. I think it's next level.
I think the issue is a lot of coaches, fitness people who spend all the day in the gym, they have no technology experience. They have no patience for technology, which is where a lot of people came stuck. And Fitr does solve that, in my opinion. Anyway, it makes it really easy for someone who's a complete technophobe to set up and go.
Yeah, and I think another thing is as well, I've had a few conversations with people. Like I had a conversation with Will, who's like Taylor's, like, I was going to say partner, but that makes it sound like you're in a relationship. But like
marketing.
Marketing guy, that's better. And with like Rob, who's here in Ireland, he uses Fitr as well. Of like, I get a message off Will or Rob or whoever saying like, hey, would Fitr ever do this? And like, I'll WhatsApp Leon and he'll say, yeah, it's due in the next update, or yeah, we actually are thinking of that, but it's going to take a couple of months or whatever. And I think that level of approachability is the same level of approachability from Taylor that I appreciate, where I can send him a video of me doing push-ups yesterday saying like, what am I doing wrong here? Or I can, like, I think that's just the foundations that CrossFit started on. And I think it's good that you have a business like that respects it, I guess, and keeps it going. Anyway, John, I'm sorry. That was an extra 3 minutes that you could have had your teeth brushed by now. Thank you for staying up late, John and Grandpa Fawcett. Thank you for staying talking for another hour after your own show, Taylor. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to nerd out on programming, they can listen to Shut Up and Scribble on Savann's platform on YouTube. And if you want to listen to John Singleton, remarkably, I still don't know how he did it, stay calm while talking to a robot that is programmed to refuse to answer questions. You can go and listen to Justin Berg talking on Progrm's YouTube channel 2 or 3 days ago. And you can find Taylor, what's the Instagram for Selfmade? At Selfmade Training Program, is it?
Yeah, it's Selfmade Training Program.
And at HWPO Training.
Yes.
And at the Progrm. No second vowel.
No A's.
Yeah, no A's. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone that was watching and commenting and stuff. Appreciate it. That was great. Thank you very, very much.